journey starts. A spark of passion lit our hearts. From first appearances to plot lines bold, foundations laid in tales of old. Heroes rise, they fall, they fight, through pages turning day and night. The start, the spark, the trigger fire that built the...
Welcome everybody to the Source Material Comics Podcast's contribution to the August 2024 Superblog Team-Up event, Foundations. So I kind of want to give just a small intro here before you get into this solo shot that I did titled Traumatic Resonance, What I Learned from Deb Whitman. I want to give you an idea of what was going through my head initially and then what this podcast ended up being. So my first thought, Foundations, and I could read to you what it says. Our comic book journey takes us to foundational works that ignited your collecting passion. We cover works that built the basis of a character, such as a first appearance or a major storyline development. We can consider a major story or plotline that had major foundational impact on the universe, set of characters, or overall genre. A foundation can be a start point, a central point in history, a trigger, a catalyst. The sky is the limit. The foundation begins now. A trigger. Yes, he used the word trigger in there, and I think that is probably the best word that applies to what this podcast became. But initially, looking at the description here, it talks about stuff that ignited your collecting passion. Well, the easiest thing that you can think of is, what was the first comic that you remember owning? What was the first comic that you remember actually buying? Now, does that ignite your collecting passion? It may not. It might be a comic book that somebody gave you and you had that and you read it. But the issue we're going to be talking about tonight, Spectacular Spider-Man number 74, it is the earliest issue that I can remember having and still have to this day. The thing is, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 74 came out in 83, cover dated January of 83, so it was the end of 82. That makes that when I was about 4.5. Now, am I getting a collecting passion at that point? Most likely not. However, I thought, well, that's a good place to start. The cover of the comic has a lady by the name of Deb Whitman, and some of you may know who Deb Whitman is, some of you may not. She only has, according to Marvel Fandom, 48 appearances in total in the Marvel Universe. There's a bit of text on the cover that says, "This is it, the mind-shattering conclusion to the Debra Whitman saga." And on the cover, it's kind of a white background with a spider web, and you can see Deb Whitman's shocked face while 8 Spider-Men spin webs around her. So when I looked at this issue in preparation for the event, and I was just looking at the cover, I wasn't looking inside the issue. When I was looking at the cover, I was like, oh, Debra Whitman, a Debra Whitman saga. Well, let's do the saga. And then I decided to take it a little bit further. And I was like, well, you know what? There's only 48 appearances of Debra Whitman. It's not like she's the Green Goblin. So I have the capability of looking at every single issue that's listed here. Let's just look at her first appearance all the way to issue 74. I'll describe the covers of the issues, but I'm not going to go into the plot of every single issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look for those panels. I'm going to look for those moments that Debra Whitman shows up, and that's really all I'm going to tell you about the comic. So all you're going to get in this podcast is Debra Whitman from the beginning to Spectacular Spider-Man number 74. That may not seem too interesting, but hey, it's a oral history of what I'm seeing through the comics for the 4 years that Debra Whitman was kind of around. This podcast turned into something a lot more than what I was expecting it to. As we reach the end and what happens in issue 74, I begin to realize some very significant parallels from my life in 1983 to what was going on in the pages of Spectacular Spider-Man 74. And again, the title of this episode is Traumatic Resonance. So pull from that what you can, but please listen to the episode, stick around, and let the revelation hit you like it hit me towards the end of the episode. Kind of a background on Deb Whitman and her creation, created by Marv Wolfman and Al Milgrom. First appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 196. I think cover date was June of 1979. I'll get that correct in the episode, I'm sure. And where we first meet Deb Whitman, she is a young, blonde secretary for Dr. Sloan. And I'll leave it at that. So let's get ready as we learn about Debra Whitman and her life in these 3.5 years in comic books. All right, so let's see where the saga starts with Debra Whitman. Deb Whitman first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 196 from 1979. Granted, it was just a small appearance. Marv Wolfman is on the script and edits here, Al Milgram on the layouts, and Mooney and Giacoya on finishes. But essentially, Peter Parker shows up at Empire University, is looking for his biophysics teacher, I think, Dr. Sloan, and she is his secretary. Peter shows up in the office, and we meet Debra for the first time. Now, her second appearance occurs in Spectacular Spider-Man number 36 from 1976. She has a bit of a bigger role here. She's in a few more panels where Pete shows up at Empire University, again looking for Dr. Sloan. Debra has lost her shoe under her desk. She ends up hitting her head on the desk. He points out that her shoe is sitting on the desk. It's a red heel on the desk. She ends up taking him back to go see where he's going to be working with Dr. Sloan and some others there as well. Steve Hopkins, and looks like there's another guy, Chip Martin. But essentially, Debra takes him back, says, yeah, here's where you're going to be sitting, here's the people that you're going to be working with, and then she leaves. And that appears to be that. The cover of this issue, issue 36 of Spectacular Spider-Man, has him facing off with the Swarm. Oh, the Killer Bees of Swarm. So it's not the Swarm, it's Swarm. Next issue is going to be Spectacular Spider-Man 42. This is cover date of May of 1980. And this cover I've seen before. The Human Torch appears to be trying to blast Spider-Man as he's swinging from the Statue of Liberty. Debra Whitman, by the way, fairly nerdy looking blonde. She's showing up here in her first panel on this issue. It looks like Dr. Sloan, Steve Hopkins, Philip Chang, Kurt Connors, Marcy Kane, and Debra are all waiting on Pete to show up. Apparently he's late. And she has a thought bubble here where she says, Marcy can dislike Pete all she wants as long as she keeps away from him. I think he's cute. Scanning through the issue, looking for some more Debra Whitman panels. Oh, here we go. Pete's on a boat here with the rest of his team. Debra, he's kind of mulling over the fact that Marcy is mean to him. So he's kind of sitting by himself alone, and Debra comes up beside him. She compliments him on being a brilliant student. She kind of feels down because she realizes Pete has his whole life ahead of him, while she is just the secretary for Dr. Sloan, and she'll end up in the typing pool. She says, if I'm lucky, I'll go from a typing pool to a suburban swimming pool, complete with a husband and 2.5 kids. And Pete's kind of getting some feelings here for Debra, and he's realizing, oh, maybe I shouldn't get involved here. And then the Human Torch shows up, and in the sky writes, Spider-Man urgently meet Human Torch. Just as Debra looks and says, Peter, would you hold me, please? Off he goes. He disappears. He's gone. I've driven away with my insecurity like all the others. Why can't I be stronger, more sure of myself? Why can't I make it on my own without looking for someone to lean on? She's upset. She's tormented. I think that's going to be the end of that issue. All right. So this issue was written by Bill Mantlo, art by Mike Zeck, inked by Jim Mooney. All right, what's the next issue Debra's in? Spectacular Spider-Man number 43. Next issue, here she comes. And this Spectacular Spider-Man cover, date June of 1980. Her name is Belladonna, and Spider-Man can't even guess what kind of trouble she is. All right, Spectacular Spider-Man 43. And Pete's back at the lab. Now, wait a second. That last issue, are we doing this thing where it's like continued in Amazing Spider-Man and no, continued in Fantastic Four number 218, my bad. That makes more sense. All right, well, so same creative team. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This creative team, written by Roger Stern, Mike Zeck on pencils, Steve Mitchell's on inks, and John Costanza on letters. And we're back at the lab here, and some thugs break in wearing pantyhose over their heads. And sure enough, they've got Debra at gunpoint. They want into the stock room. So they go into the supply room and they grab 2 drums of neoatropine. Deb is asking Peter what to do here, and he's just like, keep it cool. So they steal these drums, and then they throw Pete, Steve, and Debra into the closet. The experiment that Pete and Steve were working on kind of explodes, causes the sprinklers to go off, and immediately Pete slams the closet door shut so they can't take any of them as hostages. The robbers take off. Pete and Steve put the fire out, and then the police show up. Debra really doesn't say much. She's just kind of sitting there with this stunned look on her face. Pete tells Steve that he better see that Debra gets home. She's still pretty shaken. All right, back at Empire State University after a bunch of shenanigans happened, Pete is working on some stuff there, and Debra shows up. She'd picked up some things for him at the 7-Eleven, and he plants a smoocheroo, it looks like, right on her cheek and says, hey, thanks. How about we have dinner next week? And then he shuts the door, and of course, she's got some thoughts running through her head. I think I like that man very much. All right, next issue is going to be Amazing Spider-Man 207, cover dated August of 1980, Final Curtain. And I don't know who that is on the front of this cover. It looks like a green and purple villain of some sort, and Spider-Man's like on a stage while this guy is pretty big. A bunch of explosions around. Mesmero, my bad. So that's Mesmero on the cover. Mesmero's Revenge. Okay, oh, Debra Whitman and Pete's catching a play together at a Broadway theater. Debbie Whitman. Oh, Mesmero's on stage. He's a hypnotist. And Deborah's not impressed with Mesmero for some reason. Pete's got his suspicions, it appears. Mesmero is offering Spider-Man, he knows Spider-Man is there at the theater, and he's offering Spider-Man for some extra cash, and Pete's actually thinking about it. So Deb sees Peter, who's tying his shoe after he did some Spider-Man shenanigans, and she's trying to figure out where he was. He's like, oh, come on, I got sidetracked. Come on, let's leave. She's like, all right, I'm out of here. Let's go. And they're thinking about, want to get something to eat. Some random guy comes up to him and goes, kid, you want to buy something terrible? Well, that's not a good way to get your product. Oh my, Deb Whitman is not pleased with Pete saying he can't take her out to dinner because he has an exam tomorrow. And she knows he doesn't have any exams. And she's saying, he just got tired of my company. That's certainly not unusual. And she's on the bus heading home. All right, so Spider-Man gets offered some tickets as a reward for saving somebody, it looks like. He's offered some tickets to a chorus line, and he calls Deb up, and he says, meet me at Times Square at 7. So right now, the impression I get of Debra Whitman's character, she's kind of insecure. Pete calls her up, offers to take her out to another play, and Deb's trying to figure out if he's definitely interested. Are you sure? She's also happy that Mesmero's reviews, apparently in the paper, are bombing. Spider-Man tangles it up with Mesmero, gets knocked out, and sure enough, Debra is wondering where Pete is because Pete's late. The guy comes back. The drug dealer guy. It's funny at the end here. So these last 3 panels, Debra is looking at her watch. She's mad Pete's not there. The drug dealer guy comes back and he's like, psst, Missy, want to buy something real stinky? Leave me alone, she says. Everyone else does. They say there's a broken heart for every light on Broadway. Oh, that was issue 207. Did I go over the creative team on that one? I did not. Oh, Denny O'Neil, James Mooney, P. Marcos, Jim Novak. All right, next. Now, the checklist I'm getting here is from marvelfandom.com. So right now we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a total of 48 appearances here. It seems like she's about to become a love interest of Peter. So we may get into more in-depth stuff with her. But let's see how far we can go here before I have to shut it off tonight. So we're heading to Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man number 46. So it looks like over here in Spectacular Spider-Man, she doesn't show back up for another 3 issues there. All right, this Marvel comic could be worth $2,500 to you. Remember that? Yeah, this is September of 1980 cover date. And on the front, between the Cobra and the cop, Spidey's got more trouble than he can handle. Cobra looks to be kicking Spider-Man, who appears to be in a web blanket. All right. Deadly is the Cobra. All right, well, let's kind of scan through here and see what Deb is up to. Oh, there she is. Spider-Man lands at Empire State University, heads downstairs. Guess where he's going? That's right. Oh, interesting. I thought she would be upset. Well, Spider-Man's pretty worried about it. I really wanted to have a long talk with Debra Whitman and try to apologize for last night. When I went into action to Spider-Man to stop Mesmero, I had to leave Deb alone in the middle of the Times Square. If she'll speak to me, I have to figure out some way to make that up to her. So he shows up. He's like, "Hi, Deb. Did you get home all right?" "Oh, yes, Peter. No trouble at all." Apparently a man who's ready to meet. Some man named Bushkin called for Peter a couple minutes ago. Pete apologizes, and he offers to make it up to her somehow, and she says, "Well, we never did have dinner, and it's tomorrow. Wesner's Pub." All right. So Pete heads back to talk to his buddies. Looks like the rest of this book so far is Spider-Man versus the Cobra, who's trying to steal something, it looks like. I skipped right over the creative team once again. Roger Stern writing, Mike Zeck penciling, Bruce Patterson inking, Jim Novak on letters. And yeah, that's it. That's the only appearance of Debra Whitman in that issue. What's next? 209. Amazing Spider-Man number 209. Oh, this has got October of 1980 cover date. Kraven the Hunter using a skeleton. It looks like they're fighting in a museum. And Kraven the Hunter is about ready to wallop Spider-Man with a skeleton. Denny O'Neil story, Alan Weiss pencils, Jansen McLeod, Rubenstein, Wiacek, and Milgram on inks, Mark Rogan on lettering. Looking for Debra Whitman. And there she is. At that moment, Peter Parker and Debra Whitman are enjoying the summer sights of Manhattan's colorful Soho district. Enjoying? ? Well, Debra seems to be feeling a little off today. She's worried about her uncle. Owns a small shipping line down on the docks and's been threatened by some thugs. She's wondering if Peter can do anything. Peter's like, "No, can't do it. I ain't got the time." And she goes, "I understand. I won't bother you with it again." And then walks off. Peter decides he's going to do it, though. He's going to go check on him at some point. All right, well, that appears to be it. That's all of Debra Whitman's appearances there. Let's head to Spectacular Spider-Man number 47. Went a Toys R Us shopping spree. Cover dated October of 1980. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 47. Who is the new Prowler? Looks like the Prowler's throwing some diamonds at Spider-Man, tearing up his costume and everything. A Night on the Prowl, written by Roger Stern, Marie Severin penciling, Bruce D. on inks and letters, Glennis Wayne coloring, Denny O'Neil editing. Looks like they're at a bar in Wesner's Pub in Manhattan's Greenwich Village. So it's Peter and Debra hanging out at this bar. No sign of Debra yet. Debra shows up and says she's been looking for Peter all over the place, and he's like, "I think it's time we need to leave. He's got a class he's got to prepare for tomorrow." So he takes Debra home, kisses her on the cheek, says he'll see her early tomorrow at the office. And alone in her room, she thinks, "He only took me out because he felt sorry for me. I just know it. Why did I think he really liked me?" Deb, come on, girl. Wow. I mean, we've got to get to the bottom as to why she has this much insecurity. I mean, she must really like Peter Parker, and she's upset every single time. Of course, he leaves her high and dry a lot. That's it. That's all the appearance of Debra Whitman in Amazing Spider-Man. Spectacular Spider-Man number 47. Next appearance, Amazing Spider-Man Annual Volume 1, number 14. Okay. Oh, that should be probably a full story, I bet you. So this dropped. Yeah, this is the 1980 annual, so I'm sure it's sometime between November and December. Who is doing pencils here? Okay. This first story is called The Book of Vishanti. Denny O'Neil and Frank Miller are co-creators on this. I mean, they're opening up a Dr. Doom's castle. All right, well, I'm looking for Debra Whitman. Scanning through this Doctor Strange story in a Spider-Man book. Oh, there's Debra. Looks like Dr. Strange reached out to Peter Parker. "Help! Tremendous evil at my Sanctum Sanctorum." So Pete's in the middle of teaching a class, and he has to run out because he's got to help Dr. Strange. On his way out, he runs into Debra Whitman. Oh, sure enough, they had a date. He's got to cancel. Duty is always calling when Debbie Whitman is his date. Oh well, maybe he's telling the truth, but I doubt it. That, my friends, is all of Debra Whitman. Let's double check and make sure. Maybe this will be a happy ending and he'll make it back in time and they can go to the show. Hey, they made it. Apparently they were going to see a band called Shrapnel, and we're going to rock and roll. Oh, man. So Pete and Debbie are at this show, at this concert. He runs into somebody that he says she may have went to school with him, and she goes, "Ain't you going to kiss me hello? Come on, a teeny itty kiss won't hurt." And Pete goes, "I'm not sure I'm willing to take the chance." Debbie happens upon this conversation that he's having, and this woman's like, "Who's your four-eyed friend? Is that your mother?" Debbie, come on. Debbie's like, I didn't realize you were with someone. And she walks off. Peter gives chase. She's steady, saying that she understands that Peter wants to be with somebody else. It's okay. They end up running into, I think, Doc Ock. I haven't been following the story because I've been scanning through it, but I think they run into Doc Ock or some other little dweeb with a bowl haircut. Pete's trying to make it up to Debbie. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. Come on. Pete says he's going to buy her the best meal in the city. He's not going to stand her up. And his spider sense goes off. Pete goes out the door. Well, first off, this band Shrapnel starts walking off the stage out into the streets, still playing their instruments while a bunch of people are following them. Everybody at the concert's like following these guys. They keep saying, "Bend Sinister." That gets the attention of Pete. Pete's like, I gotta go. So after he promised another date to Debra, he breaks it, takes off. I'll call you tomorrow. And Debra's like, you don't have to bother. And that's the end of that. Creative team, once again, Denny O'Neil and Frank Miller, co-creators. Tom Palmer was on inks, Joe Rosen on letters, Ben Sean on colors. We're heading to Amazing Spider-Man number 210. All right, cover date November of 1980. Spider-Man and Madam Web. Hey, Spidey, think you're the only webhead in town? Meet Madam Web. I wonder if this is her first appearance. I feel like it might be. Madam Web. First appearance. Yep. 210. All right, let's see what's about to happen here. The Prophecy of Madam Web. Story by Denny O'Neil. Introducing the newest art team supreme of John Romita Jr. and Joe Sinnott. Letters by Jay Novak. Colors by B. Sharon. All right, let's see what happens here. Remember, we're just scanning for Debra Whitman. Oh, there she is. They're going through Chinatown. Pete's asking her if she's seeing a fortune teller. She corrects him and says, not a fortune teller. She's a psychic. A teacher of paranormal phenomena. And the psychic they're about to go see is, sure enough, Madam Web. Oh, Pete's got to leave. He's got to get to a meeting at the Globe in precisely 5 minutes. So he takes off. And that's the end of the Debra Whitman appearance for that issue. Next up, Spectacular Spider-Man number 48. Cover dated November of 1980. This cover looks like we're still talking about the Belladonna. There appears to be a man on the front cover in a robe who just shot Spider-Man in the chest. 4 seconds ago, Kingsley pulled the trigger. Now there's no one else alive. Somewhere, Belladonna is laughing. Well, our creative team, I better get that out of the way before I forget. The title of the story is Double Defeat. Roger Stern writing, Marie Severin pencils, Bruce Patterson inking, and Rick Parker on letters. Ben Sean on colors. Somebody is at Peter's door. After a bunch of stuff happened, Pete's at home. Somebody's at his door. He opens the door, and it's Deb Whitman. She was in the neighborhood and thought she'd just drop by. It looks like either the power's out or a fuse box blew or something. A fuse blew. He has to light a lamp. They're sitting there talking. He asks her if she's got something on her mind because she hasn't been talking since he invited her in the apartment, and she says she's never talked to a man in his bathrobe before. Pete switches the light on. It explodes and catches a stuffed bear on fire. She tells him to throw it in the tub, and he's like, no, I've got some photochemicals in there. It might explode. So he uses some curtains to smother the fire. He smothers the fire, and Deb and Peter have a big laugh about what happened. They're going to go get some coffee. And there's no more appearance of Deb Whitman in that issue. Next up, Amazing Spider-Man number 211 and 212. All right, 211. Cover dated December of 1980. We've got the Submariner on the front of the cover here hitting Spider-Man. No one may attack the Submariner's underwater kingdom, not even you, Spider-Man. And our creative team, who's not listed on the story page here, the Spider and the Sea Scourge. All right, we're back at the Empire State University. Pete's got a bad case of the itchies. Keeps scratching. And here comes Deb Whitman as they sit on a bench under some trees. Deb shows up. She's acting kind of gloomy, and Pete asks her why. She's again worried about her uncle. He's decided to captain one of his ships to fulfill a contract. He says he can't get anyone else to do it, and unless the ship goes out, everything will be lost. He's old and he has a bad heart. She feels so helpless and scared. But she gets up and says, no point in bringing you down with my troubles. See you later. Pete's finally figuring out he needs to help her uncle as she leaves. Next up is issue 212. I don't know why the creative team wasn't on display here in this issue, but issue 212, The Amazing Spider-Man Cover dated January 1980. Spidey faces the wet threat of Hydro Man. Hydro Man trying to blast Spidey with some water, and sure enough, he's able to move out of the way. Creative team, Denny O'Neil, John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney on art, Jim Novak letters, Bob Sharon on colors. And let's see what happens here. Is this Hydro Man's first appearance? It sure is. January of 1981. Did I say that right at the beginning? Cover dated January of I said 1980, but it's January of 1981. And sure enough, it is Hydro Man's first appearance here. Well, we're looking for the appearance of Deb Whitman. Where is she? There she is. Just getting out of the shower. Phone's ringing. Sure enough, it's Pete trying to reach her. Trying to go on a date again. And he tells her that, hey, you're going to help me he says, you're going to help me play intrepid photojournalist. See you in an hour. So apparently he's got some money. Well, J. Jonah Jameson is paying him to do some work here. So he's going to take her along with him. Oh, so Pete takes Debra to the Daily Bugle. Deb gets to meet J. Jonah Jameson. He turns on the charm. Here comes Robbie Robertson. Oh, he lets them know that Hydro Man, a villain calling himself Hydro Man. Well, let's try this. As for this screwball, the media guys are calling him Hydro Man. Jameson sends Parker out. Go get me some photos of Hydro Man. Pete looks at Deb and says, hey, this is dangerous. I don't want you to come along. I'll have to take a rain check. And of course, Deb is upset. You promised. Oh, I understand. Let's head back to Spectacular Spider-Man number 50. Ooh, this looks like an interesting cover. So this is January 1981. Cover date, issue 50. Alone Against the Aliens. 50th fantastic issue. This looks like sort of a They Live situation where Pete's spider sense is going off and people are dressed up like humans, but they're not. They're aliens. Title of the story is Dilemma. Creative team is Roger Stern, writer, John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney as on art, Jim Novak on letters, Ben Shawn on colors. There's Deb. Pete is realizing that he needs to go meet Aunt May and her new boyfriend for dinner tomorrow. She's going to be celebrating her engagement to the guy, and she wanted me to bring a date. So Pete reaches out to one Debra Whitman. Deb agrees to go. She'll meet him there at noon. And this is apparently at the Restwell nursing home. Pete says he's having trouble thinking of Aunt May getting married at her age. Deb thinks it's romantic. Yeah, I wondered if they bring this up. At one point, he mentions to her that Aunt May almost married Dr. Octopus. Pete meets up with a man by the name of Mr. Lubensky. He introduces Debra to Aunt May and Mr. Lubensky. Deb keeps trying to tell Peter that he needs to loosen up a little bit. She can tell he's uncomfortable with the fact that Aunt May is engaged to somebody right now. So Deb, Peter, Aunt May, and Mr. Lubensky sit down and have dinner. The spider sense goes off. They look up and realize that all the customers have left the restaurant. Here comes a bunch of servers their way, but they definitely do not seem friendly. Pete gets the bright idea to grab one of their faces and rips off a mask, and lo and behold, it's aliens. It's aliens, folks. Pete starts punching away, fists are flying. Even Mr. Lubensky's getting into it. Even in his wheelchair, he's trying to swing brooms and stuff. Deb is in awe at how strong Spider-Man is. All this alien stuff, Deb is like, it's a horrible dream. Peter's taken prisoner, and Aunt May is upset, and Debra consoles her, saying, we've got to get Peter back somehow. We just have to. All right, let's do one more. So how many have we done so far? 1, 2, 3. So we've done 14. Let's get into Amazing Spider-Man number 213. Cover dated February of 1981. Creative team Denny O'Neil on story. Breakdowns John Romita Jr. Finishes Jim Mooney. Lettering Jim Novak. Coloring Bob Sharon. All they want to do is kill you, Spider-Man. And our cover has the Wizard on the front. It looks like Spider-Man is swinging toward a large robot spider. I am the great and powerful wizard, and my robot spider will slay you, web slinger. Oh, man. Pete's about to go on a date with Debbie and ends up running into his neighbor, who is, according to him, she is the most gorgeous creature I have ever in all my life seen. Oh, boy. Almost forgets that he's going out on a date with Debbie. Debra, Whitman, finally gets to Debra's apartment. They go out, looking at New York. Both of them get on the ferry. Pete's telling her jokes. Deb is steadily saying, I've never seen you like this. Pete sees some hot chick, and now all of a sudden he's like, obviously, we'll just say that his attitude's changed a little bit. Debra can pick up on it, and she lays right on him. He says, I guess I'm just happy. Oh, Peter, me too. And then she puts a big old smoocheroo on his face. They go back to the apartment. She offers to make some sandwiches. He declines. He's got laundry and things. Debbie's eyes ask a question she desperately wants answered, and the instant stretches between them until it snaps. And then Pete says, see you Monday. And Deb says, well, bye. Oh, man. Pete, I mean, come on. The next panel. In his thoughts, I have a feeling Debbie's gotten the wrong idea. She kissed me like she meant it. And to me, she's a nice kid, period. Dude, you've been leading this girl on, taking her on dates and all sorts of stuff. Like, you haven't figured out that this chick digs you? What a dense. Just, wow, dude. Can't believe it. Pete heads home, gets a phone call. It's Deb. She says she's hoping she's not bothering him. Just wanted to say that she really enjoyed the ferry ride. And then a knock comes at Peter's door. He says he's got to get back to her, and he opens the door, and sure enough, it's his gorgeous neighbor. And that's the end of that issue. So we left off. We're about ready to get into Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, number 51, cover dated February of 1980. The cover of it has Spider-Man punching the crap out of Mysterio, knocking his helmet off, and what looks to be Deb Whitman watching on the side. So she may be a little bit more prominent here in this issue. We're getting into the Aliens and Illusions, the continuation of the story where they went to dinner and we got aliens that have apparently abducted Spider-Man here. But Mysterio seems to be behind it. Roger Stern writing, Marie Severin and Jim Mooney on art, Jim Novak on letters, C. Shield on colors. All right, let's see where Deb Whitman shows up in this issue. We got a bit of a recap here. Spider-Man going through it with Mysterio. Always playing head games. So we're back at the Restwell nursing home. Apparently Deb has given her side of the story about how Pete was abducted by aliens to the police. And Aunt May is distraught, laying in her bed, worried she's never going to see Peter again. And Deb's giving her a bit of consolation. Mr. Lubinsky's checking on her. Are you going to be okay, Deb? Yes. Ooh, but things are going to get pretty dicey here. Deb gets kidnapped by a couple thugs. They were sent to get her. All right, Spider-Man, who's fighting off these aliens and trying to find Mysterio, finds a control room, goes inside, and sure enough, he sees Deb Whitman on a view screen with Mysterio clenching his fist behind her. Mysterio's apparently grilling her about some type of hidden treasure and gangsters. She has no idea what he's talking about. Deb just can't believe this is happening to her. And now Mysterio's threatening to shoot Debra Whitman. Spider-Man plays like he doesn't know who she is, and he's about to give chase to try and catch up to Mysterio and save Debra. Mysterio keeps trying to escape. Spider-Man is now using Mysterio's weapons against him, these holographic projectors. Now, as Debra's being dragged along, she starts to realize that things are not as they seem. She does not believe that aliens were involved and believes it's Mysterio's doing after everything she saw tonight. So on her way through, she's going through like a prop room and grabs what appears to be the Cloud City from Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. And it's a model, obviously, and bops Mysterio right in the head with it, cracking the old fish bowl. She gets away, starts running. Mysterio takes his helmet off just in time for Spider-Man to show up. As she's going down through a hallway, she finds a phone, calls the police, and they're like, where are you at? She's like, I don't know. I was brought here blindfolded. Well, they're going to try to trace the call. Spider-Man nails Mysterio, punches him out, while Deb comes out of the room that she was in. Spider-Man runs into her, and she's adamant that she finds Peter. She believes Peter is still there. Spider-Man gives her directions to go to her room, and he proceeds to wall crawl his way up to a ventilation shaft to get into the room before she gets there. And when she opens the door, he plays that he's been knocked out and just regained consciousness. Just as Debra opens up the door, he goes, Deb, what are you doing here? Oh, Peter, Mysterio kidnapped me, but Spider-Man showed up and saved us all. Really? Hey, I guess that's one we owe him. I suppose so, but he's so weird. Yeah, well, nobody's perfect, kid. Nobody's perfect. And that is how we end the issue. All right, what's next? Looks like we're going to Amazing Spider-Man. Oh, we got 3 issues of Amazing that we're going to stick with. 215, 216, and 217 here. So let's get into 215. And our cover says April of 1980. Oh, that's right. The last issue was February of 1981. We're now into April of 1981. And on the front cover of Amazing Spider-Man 215 has the Wizard. A few people I don't recognize. There's Submariner and Spider-Man like in agony on the front. We don't have to kill them. Spider-Man and the Submariner are this is the Frightful Four. We don't have to kill them. Spider-Man and the Submariner are no longer a threat to the Frightful Four. Well, we're picking up mid-story here, but let's see where we can find Deb. See where she's hanging out here in this issue. As soon as I see Spider-Man go into his apartment, I know Deb's going to be showing up soon. He's out of it. He's beat up a good bit, changed his clothes, and he's back into Peter Parker, but he goes and knocks on Deb Whitman's door. And yeah, he's kind of out of it. He collapses in her arms. He lays on the couch, and if I can just rest a few minutes, you stay as long as you like, Peter, and I'll stay with you. 14 hours and 17 minutes later, Deb Whitman is making pancakes for this guy. And my gosh, this is a mountain of pancakes. Like, there has to be... So she's got 2 plates out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big pancakes, along with, like, another 7 or 8 on a plate to grab from. Man, she ain't worried about carbs. Oh, my bad. A bit of breakfast, pancakes, ham, sausage, bacon, home fries, apple pie, and coffee. None of that's on the table. Just the amount of pancakes are insane. Oh, that's funny. Poor Deb. She really likes Peter. It doesn't sound right. She likes to go to Broadway shows. Oh, man. As soon as Parker wakes up. What time is it? Oh, I've got to go. I've got something I got to do. You know, she's already bought tickets for a Broadway show. Anything you say. Skips breakfast. I'll call you in a couple days. By the way, thanks. Don't mention it. And then in her thought bubble, don't dare. Ooh, goodness. Oh, I'm just cruising through the issue. Lyra is a part of the Frightful Four, apparently. And I think she was masquerading as Pete's hot neighbor. All right, well, that's the end of Deb's appearance in 215. Did I give the creative team for that? Oh, my goodness. I swear. Story by Denny O'Neil. Art by John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney. Lettered by Jim Novak. Colored by Roger Slifer. Name of the story was By My Power Shall I Be Vanquished. And now as we get into the next story, which I'm sure is going to be by the same creative team, issue 216, May of 1981. Oh, it's the return of Madam Web. So the cover has... It says, the race is on. Will death be the victor? Spider-Man is leaping towards a gunman. I think this is like this is a marathon. Yeah, this is a marathon. And all right, let's see what happens here. The name of the story is Marathon. Story by Denny O'Neil. Art by John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney. Letter by Jim Novak. Coloring by Bob Sharon. Pete's still woozy. I mean, like really bad. There's Deb in a little... thought montage, I guess, of Pete thinking about the women he's been involved with. And there might be room in my life for another woman. For Debbie? Oh, and he has arrived at Greenwich Village. He's finally made it to Debbie's building, knocks on the door. Peter, I wasn't expecting you. Oh. He has to come in, and she's like, that's not a very good idea. And here's another dude. It's Biff Rifkin. Biff Rifkin from her hometown. Pete is upset. A little jealous. Wasn't too long ago he wasn't interested. Now he's legit thinking about the kiss that they shared. Biff Rifkin. All right, that appears to be all the Deb Whitman in that issue. Now we're heading to 217 from June of 1981. On the cover, Hydro Man and the Sandman team up. They're going to... We got a nice white cover here with Peter Parker sandwiched in between Sandman and Hydro Man. Here's mud in your eye, Spidey. Title of the story, Here's Mud in Your Eye. Denny O'Neil on story, John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney on art, Jim Novak on lettering, Bob Sharon on colors. Oh my goodness. All right, so Pete's going to go out on a town here. So an hour and a change of clothing later, the critics say the ending of this film is dynamite, absolutely impossible to guess. You know what movie he's going into? Halloween 2. And he runs into Biff Rifkin and Deb Whitman coming out of the movie. This Biff Rifkin guy, oh yeah, he's written to be right under your skin. The old Biffer, that's me. Press the palm, Petey. He's shaking his hand. Biff Rifkin. I got to read this to you, okay? So Pete's like, how's the movie? They're coming out of the movie, mind you. And Biff's like, quite well done. Very exciting. Intellectually stimulating for a mere entertainment, that is. Even I was fooled. And so as they're walking away, Biff turns around and goes, I never imagined it was the grandmother who planted the bomb. Of course, if I had, the whole thing would have been pointless. And ruins, in quotes, the movie for Pete. And Pete is just so incensed that he just spoiled the movie. Boy, oh boy, is that relatable. Gosh, we're 43 years out. Nobody wants to know the ending of a movie before they go to it. Biff Rifkin. I think that's what I want to call it now. Somebody spoils a movie, don't Biff Rifkin that movie. As they get ready to say something, don't Biff Rifkin it. Shoot. All right, well, that's the end of Deb there. She takes off, walks off with Rifkin. See if we have any other appearances of Deb Whitman. Doesn't look like it. All right, next up, Marvel Team Up Volume 1, number 106. Covered in June of 1981. Cover is Marvel Team Up, Spider-Man and Captain America. Spider-Man is swinging and grabbing Cap's arm, and looks like we got the tail of the Scorpion on there, who has apparently cut Spidey's web, so Cap and Spider-Man are going to fall. Definitely not a good place to meet the Scorpion. Tom DeFalco, writer. Herb Trimpe, artist. Mike Esposito on inks. Diana Albers on letters. And Carl Gafford on colors. Name of the story, A Savage Sting Has the Scorpion. All right, let's see where old Deb Whitman is going to show up here. I'm curious as to the treatment that Tom DeFalco is going to give her. I imagine it'd be all right. Now, there's Pete back at Empire State University. He's rushing to get to the classes, it looks like. No, I'm sorry. He's rushing to change into Spider-Man. Deb's trying to get his attention. I've been looking for you, all over for you. I guess you didn't hear me. As Pete rushes off. In her head, she's thinking, or did he? She insecure. I mean, my gosh, this poor girl. She just thinks Pete is not interested in her at all. That's the end of that. Really brief appearance in Marvel Team Up 106. Next up, Spectacular Spider-Man number 55. So we've got a bit of a gap here in Spectacular Spider-Man since she showed up. Number 55, June of 1981. Front cover, as if Spidey didn't have enough trouble already, Nitro's back. And it's a weird cover here. We've got, this is Spectacular Spider-Man number 55. Nitro, who is standing on the cover, and I think he's exploding because he's like human, kind of like a human bomb or something. And he's kind of blowing Spidey backwards. It's mostly kind of like a pink with purple lines all over it, but most of the lines are kind of like an outline of Nitro's body. So, and then we have the actual Nitro down here. This is, it's a weird, like, kinetic cover of way of getting across Nitro's powers, I guess. Our story, Roger Stern writing, Luke McDonnell on pencils, Jim Mooney on inks, John Morelli on letters, and Roger Slifer. I'm sure I'm messing that up. It's either Sliffer or Slifer on colors. There's Deb. He's back at Empire State, and Deb's behind the desk. Guess she's called in sick the past few days or yesterday, and now Pete's kind of surprised to see her there, ask her if she's feeling okay. She's saying yes, thank you. Pete tries to apologize. She cuts him off. It's all right. I'm sure you had your reasons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot of reports to type. She looks like, in the next panel, as Pete walks off, kind of sad, obviously realizing that he's kind of treated her like crap lately. She also looks like she's crying. There's like a tear in her eye. Amazing Spider-Man number 218 up next. 218 is July of 1981. In Manhattan stalks a monster. And there is a large, I don't know who this is going to be. We'll find out when we read the issue. A large rock-looking thing that Spider-Man is seeing the tower over these buildings, which I'm sure that's just for effect. Eye of the Beholder is the name of the story. Denny O'Neil on story. John Romita Jr. on pencils. Mooney and Milgram on inks. Novak on letters. Bob Sharon on colors. Oh, this is like the combination of Hydro Man and Sandman. That's the big monster. Ugh. All right, let's see where our girl's at. Let's see Deb Whitman. There she is. All right, back in the halls of Empire State University. Pete's trying to make small talk. It's been a while. She says, I've been very busy lately. I didn't think you'd notice. Pete asks her out for a cup of coffee, but lo and behold, it's me, the old Biffer, Biff Rifkin at your service. Well, Biff picks up Deb and they leave. They scored tickets to Evita. Pete's a little jelly. One of his buddies calls him out on it too. That appears to be all we get for Deb Whitman in that issue. I mean, she's consistently showing up. It's just for not even a page. Spectacular Spider-Man number 56, July of 1981. Ooh, is he going to be facing Jack-O-Lantern? On the cover here has Spider-Man, black cover, web in the background, Spider-Man there, and what appears to be, I'm pretty sure, is going to be Jack-O-Lantern. Title of the story is The Peril and the Pumpkin. Written by Roger Stern, Jim Shooter on layouts, Jim Mooney on finished art, Janice Chang on letters, Sharon and Russos on colors. Yep, it's the Jack-O-Lantern. All right, where's Deb? There's Deb. So I guess Pete's upset that Steve's going to play a prank on Marcy, trying to get Deb to see the light. Apparently Marcy's wearing scarves now, and Steve's going to tease her about it or something. And Pete is very much a proponent of she has a right to her privacy. And Deb's like, I've never thought about it that way. So Pete's using this to kind of use it as a launching pad to kind of get some stuff off his chest about how he has his secrets too. But he is using it by framing it where Marcy is being secretive, and that's not all that bad. Oh, Deb's starting to get a little upset, and Pete's like, oh no, please, don't worry about it. Oh, wow. So Marcy walks in, and Steve reaches down from the ceiling and pulls off her wig. She had this blonde wig on, and now she starts crying. Marcy is upset. She's not a real blonde. Oh, she's crying. Are you very sure you can't humiliate me some more? And she takes off running. Pete goes to try and console her. Deb shows up and tells him that there's someone that needs to talk to him right now. Your aunt's on the phone and she sounds hysterical. Aunt May is upset because Nathan, the guy she's engaged to, Mr. Lubinsky, goes to a hospital for rehabilitation. And it turns out that rehab unit is currently, she sees on the news that there are some terrorists that have taken over part of the hospital. Anyway, Deb offers to go with Pete. Pete says, no, I've got to handle this myself. And Deb, of course, watches him leave and thinks to herself, oh, Peter, I want so much to help you, to share in your problems, if only you'd confide in me more, or if I could find the strength to confide in you. So that was Spectacular Spider-Man number 56, Deb Whitman's appearance. Now we're heading back to Marvel Team Up, folks. Looks like this is the annual, volume 1, number 4. All right, so annual number 4, 1981's annual, and I have this issue. I've never read it, and I've wanted to. We're in the middle of talking about Alias and the Purple Man. So, Marvel Team Up Annual, Spider-Man, Moon Knight, Iron Fist, Power Man, Daredevil, Pawns of the Purple Man. Frank Miller writing, Herb Trimpe and Mike Esposito on art, George Russos on colors, Diana Albers on letters. Name of the story is Power Play. The front cover has the Purple Man. All you see is his clenched fists. Another white background here. Purple Man's head, while the characters I named earlier, Spider-Man, Power Man, Iron Fist, and Daredevil, they look to be clenched in Purple Man's hands here. Unfortunately, we don't get to read much about the Purple Man here. We are finding Deb Whitman. This is the Deb Whitman podcast. Only a couple places Deb Whitman hangs out. Empire State University or her apartment. I'm scanning through this. I mean, the Kingpin's involved. There's Power Man. Oh, there she is. The blonde bombshell with the glasses. Where are we at here? Some type of theater? Yep, we're at the theater again. Peter Parker's there, hanging out with Deb Whitman. Looks like it's J. Jonah Jameson on the stage, bringing out the Purple Man. So apparently there's a scare that there's a fire. Matt Murdock is trying to get the audience to evacuate, so he lights a cigar and yells smoke. Spider-Man watches as Deb Whitman runs away, so he can make sure her back is turned so he can turn into Spider-Man. Oh, Moon Knight's in this piece. All right, there's Moon Knight. That's the end of that. Deb Whitman in there for 2 panels. Poor Deb. Very inconsequential. We'll put it that way. All right, 58. Spectacular Spider-Man number 58, September of 1981 on the front cover. Here's the web slinger you demanded, fighting, joking, defying death in a savage rooftop battle, ravaged by the Ringer. Talked about the Ringer not too long ago on the 90s podcast. I think he ends up dying and his wife takes the rings, and there's a big revenge plot in Gosh, I can't even remember the name of the book now. Not friendly. It's the Foes of Spider-Man. Deadly Foes of Spider-Man, I think. All right. Name of the story is Ring Out the Old, Ring In the New. Written by Roger Stern, penciled by John Byrne, inked by Vince Coletta, lettered by Gene Simek, colored by Ben Shawn. All right, there we go. Familiar place. It's Empire State University. Pete is walking. All right, where's Deb? There she is. Pete makes his way into Dr. Sloan's office, which apparently is the TA office as well. And there's Deb sitting behind the desk. Oh, Steve's going to get his what for taking the wig off of Marcy. Apparently they're having like a kangaroo court kind of deal here. Formal charges. Deb's handing over the formal charges. I hope they'd throw the book at you, Steve. Academic probation's too good for you. Wow. So Steve is thinking his college career is over. He then proceeds to get a pie in the face, and Marcy reveals that her hair's grown back. She's a beautiful brunette now. So Pete asks Deb to kind of step away so he can talk to her in private. Asks her to dinner so they can talk over things. His treat. She agrees. How do you think this is going to end? Because the Spider-Man is involved in something going on with the ringer. Oh, he makes it. They make it to like looks like a sushi bar or something. Pete's kind of laying it out there. He's kind of gun shy when it comes to relationships. Dinner's over, but she says she'd like to continue the conversation. But Pete's got an errand to run. He can't do that. Shouldn't take too long. Meet me at my place in half an hour. And he makes it back. He beats the ringer, makes it back to his apartment, and Deborah shows up, and he offers her to come in, and they're going to make some popcorn. Now we have it. Now we're heading into Spectacular Spider-Man Annual number 3. So what's going on at this point? Annual number 3. King size annual for 1981, featuring the startling final fate of Man-Wolf. And it looks like it appears to have John Jameson on the front cover, turning into the wolf, the Man-Wolf. Sun on the right-hand side with J. Jonah Jameson there. Moon on the left-hand side. It's kind of split down the middle with Spider-Man on the other side. And, of course, the Man-Wolf is split down the middle as well. Like the Moon side is turned into the wolf, while the side with the sun shows John. I wonder if this is going to be a backup story. Yep, it's going to be a backup story. Here's a breakdown of the office of the Daily Bugle. No. I'm sorry. This is they have floor plan for the office that Spider-Man. Oh boy. Now I'm having. All right. Let me explain what I'm seeing here. There's a full page spread of the floor plan for Dr. Sloan's office, where Pete's cubicle's at, Marcy Kane's, Phil Chang's, Steve Hopkins, the desk of Debra Whitman, remote terminal, where you can hook up to the ESU Computing Center. And, of course, Dr. Morris Sloan's office. But it's funny because at the top it just says The Office. And now I'm thinking of course, The Office. And what kind of shenanigans those people would get into. Pete's Pals and Gals. A script by Roger Stern, art by Marie Severin and Frank Giacoia. So this is going to be a one-page story of a typical day at Empire State University. Oh, Steve comes up, pats Pete on the back and says, "How's it going, man?" Pete looks over and says, "Oh, all right, I guess, Steve." And Deb says, "Oh, Peter." And sure enough, he's got a sign stuck to his back that says, "I'll fall for anything." Gallery of Spider-Man's most famous foes: Morbius, the living vampire; Gibbon, Dr. Jonas Harrow; Hammerhead. All right, so yeah, we get one small, tiny shot there of Deb hanging out with everybody in the office. All right. Next issue is going to be Amazing Spider-Man 221. So 3 issues have gone by since we were last in Amazing Spider-Man. Front cover says Crisis on Campus. The Rage of Ramrod. Pretty sure I have this issue too. Spider-Man, it looks like, is trying to dodge this guy who's using his head as a battering ram, who's going right into a brick wall. And my guess is this is on the campus of Empire State University. Blues for Lonesome Pinky is the name of the story. Written by Denny O'Neil, Alan Kupperberg on pencils, Jim Mooney on inks, Jim Novak on letters, and C. Shield on colors. Where's Deb at? There she is. Biff Rifkin and Debbie Whitman. I didn't expect to find you in a country club. Oh, I'm sorry, country and western club. So Biff is still seeing, put that in quotes, because I don't know. I assume for sure he's got to be, these two are dating. Biff goes up to the bar with Deb and Of course, Deb's mind is just on Pete. Poor Peter, he looks so lost, so lonely. I really like him, but he never seems to have time for me. Biff does. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of that. All right. Spectacular Spider-Man number 60, 61, 62. Let's see if we can blaze through these. All right, issue 60 of Spectacular Spider-Man. Cover dated November of 1981. This is a pretty cool looking cover. It's just got Spider-Man kind of hovering over the city. Won a Columbia 10-speed racer, Formula 10. It looks like it's going to be Spider-Man versus the Beetle on this one. Oh, Pete's outside, passes a grocery store, and there's Deb. Peter, is that you? Oh, Debra Whitman, hi. I cannot say that I call too many people by their first and last names. I guess Deb calls him out here. No need to be so formal, Peter. Pete's complaining how he's kind of sore, and she's like, I bet you haven't had dinner yet, have you? You need to take better care of yourself. She says she owes him a meal and says, come with me. They go back to the apartment, and there's Biff. Biff Rifkin sitting on the couch. Ooh, wow, they got a brand new TV. It looks like big time. Big TV. 25-inch Sony color console. How'll she afford that? I didn't read that. Let's try it again. Pete just said that. That just came out of Pete's mouth. She makes $18,000 a year before taxes. Pete's like, that makes my teaching assistant salary sound like small change. Oh, news report comes on about the Beetle. And guess what? Pete's got to leave. She's got dinner almost ready. She's grabbing the chips. Have to run off. I'll try to call you later. Deb's looking off and to watch Pete leave. I suppose I should be angry with him again, but he seems so upset. Was it something I did? Maybe I shouldn't have invited him to dinner with Biff here. Peter doesn't seem to like Biff very much. I don't like Biff. Oh, she's thinking about how Biff can be a little self-centered, but he's very considerate to her. Pete's not. And she doesn't believe Pete is reliable. Wow, we got a retelling of the origin story here at the end. Huh. All right, issue 61. I don't know if I have this issue or not. Purple cover. The Moonstone is a harsh mistress. Issue number 61, cover dated December of 1981. Beginning September 12th on NBC, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Oh my gosh. Takes me back a little bit. Granted, I'm only 3 at this point, but I remember I had a small, like, black and white TV that was in my room when I was probably 4 or 5, and I was catching Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on that. All right, story by Roger Stern, Bill Mantlo on dialogue, and Ed Hannigan and Jim Mooney on art, Gene Samek on letters, and Ben Shahn on colors. The title of the story, By the Light of the Silvery Moonstone. Just scanning through here, Pete has to perform CPR, and we make sure we get a explanation in our little editor's box with an asterisk, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. That's from Therapeutic Tom right there. Oh, there's Deb. Elsewhere, Biff Rifkin and Deb apparently just got done eating pizza, and they see an ambulance. This apparently is the girl that Spider-Man just revived, coming out of Empire State University. Oh, it's Marcy Kane. Oh, geez, Marcy Kane got hurt. And Deb asks what was going on. The cop tells her that Pete was there, thank goodness. And of course, this stirs emotions in Deb. Peter's the nicest guy I've ever known, and he seems to have me, but he never seems to have the time for me. Biff may come on strong, but he's attentive, dependable. Everything Peter isn't. Yet, if I ever needed help, would Biff be able to come to my aid as Peter came to Marcy's? And there you have it. All right, let's get into issue 62. January of 1982. Front cover. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, beware the glittering gun of Goldbug. Oh boy. Cover is green with Spider-Man in gold lettering, because Goldbug has apparently shot it with his gold gun. And there's a bunch of figures that have been turned to gold, one of which looks like that might be Deb Whitman. Oh. Story by Bill Mantlo, art by Ed Hannigan and Jim Mooney, letters by Albers, colors by Sharon, and the title of the story is Gold Fever. Looks like Dr. Sloan is asking Deb to try and find Peter Parker. Pete jumps down into the office. Deb approaches him and says, Dr. Sloan is really mad. Pete can't resist but ask about Biff Rifkin. He says, how's things with that preppy boyfriend of yours, Biff? She says, I've been meaning to talk to you about that, but before she can, Dr. Sloan interrupts. Oh, so Pete gets sidetracked with a discussion with Marcy and walks off as Deb watches him walk away, yet again forgetting about her. You never have time for me. That's why I date Biff. She doesn't want to express her longing for him because of her fear of rejection. Her thoughts, borrowed perhaps from too many Gothic novels, are interrupted as Dr. Morris Sloan emerges from his office. Yes. So Dr. Sloan leaves for the day, and all of a sudden there is an explosion. She's worried about Peter while these security guards are trying to avoid the gun of, that's right, Goldbug and his gold gun. And Deb, ever worried about Peter, takes off running into the room and gets shot with the gold gun. Turned into gold, folks. Oh, Pete jumps in. He realizes that they're encased in this gold plating and they're going to suffocate. And in a mad dash, Pete whips up some kind of scientific mumbo jumbo to unleash or take them out of their gold encased prison. It's an acid solution. And he rescues the security guards and Deb Whitman. All right. As we continue with the saga of Debra Whitman, we get into Amazing Spider-Man number 225, February of 1982. I believe we're getting here. And this has, I think this is full killer. I could be wrong here on the cover. We got a yellow cover, Spider-Man, bunch of Spider-Men flying around, a large man who looks to have like a hat. That's not a hat, though. It's a crazy looking, like, ornate piece of fabric around his head. He's got a smoking gun in his right hand, blue suit. Title of the story is Fools Like Us. Written by Roger Stern, John Romita Jr. and Bob Wiacek on art, Joe Rosen on letters, and Glynis Wein on colors. Yeah, that's a hat on his head. Looking for Deb Whitman here. No Deb Whitman so far. Here we go. Oh, wow. Pete comes into the office, and Deb is mad. Some guy come in looking for Peter, and when she didn't know where Pete was, I guess the guy called her a fool. And she's furious. Pete must know what's going on because he's upset and storms off. While Deb is like, what? What's going on? And that's the end of that issue. We had the Amazing Spider-Man 227, cover dated April of 1982. Amazing Spider-Man number 227, the shocking, heart-wrenching battle our own hero can't bear to win, Spider-Man versus the Black Cat. Title of the story is Going Straight. Roger Stern writing, John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney on art, Joe Rosen on letters, Bob Sharon on colors. And here we go. Looking for Deb Whitman. And a little thought bubble here as Pete's thinking about the women that were interested in him. I thought Debra Whitman was interested in me, but she keeps dating some preppy jerk. Pete's in a really good mood. He just had a run-in with Felicia Hardy, and Marcy and Deb are hanging out at the front desk, and they can't believe how blasé he is, as there's a paper that's due. It's half of his midterm grade. Deb has never seen him like this before. And that's all she wrote there. Let's get into Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 65. Front cover, Spider-Man falls prey to the mind-maddening jungle potions of Kraven the Hunter. And yeah, Spider-Man looks like he's out of it. Kraven the Hunter looks like a massive, ghoulish, demonic guy coming after him with long fingernails. Title of the story, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. The credits are in billboards on the side of these buildings. Bill Mantlo writing, Bob Hall, Jim Mooney on art, Bob Sharon on colors, Novak on letters. All right, we're at Dr. Sloan's office here. Pete comes out of Dr. Sloan's office. Looks like Dr. Sloan's giving Pete a hard time here, apparently because of grades. And Deb's kind of concerned. She decides to walk with him, talk to him a little bit. Biff Rifkin. Waiting for him to show up. Deb just wants Pete to open up. I know we'd be good for each other, she thinks. But Pete says, I've got some thinking to do, okay? Marcy runs into her and asks her what Pete's problem is as he's walking away. And Deb's like, well, I'm just a secretary, so he seems to think his problems are far beyond my comprehension. And Marcy's like, well, they're not beyond mine. I'll see you later. I've got a science scholarship, too. And Deb kind of walks off, kind of sad, because she can't share any more time with Pete, and Marcy's running up to talk to him. And that's all she wrote for that one. Amazing Spider-Man 228, Cover dated May of 1982. So I am 4 years old at this point. Kind of a yellowish cover. Murder by Spider. Ooh, this is kind of gruesome. Spider-Man's swinging in, but this guy is like covered in spiders and he looks like he's dead. The most shocking offbeat mystery of the year. And the name of the story is Murder by Spider. Written by Jan Strnau, Strnao. Penciled by Rick Leonardi. Dave Simmons on inks, Janice Shang on letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. And so it looks like Deb's accompanying Peter Parker to some type of a house to go look at some antique furniture, maybe? So apparently this is a place that Pete was just at, where an old man died in front of him, and Pete believes somebody killed him for some kind of antique that's in the house. Oh, Deb grabs some kind of a quill, and some guy comes up and grabs it from her and says, I just bought all of these. I'd appreciate it if you don't touch my possessions. I was like, geez Louise. Pete gets some kind of intuition about this man, decides to follow him as he's leaving. And ladies and gentlemen, guess what? Peter Parker has to leave Deb Whitman again. I just remembered something important. Sorry, kid. I'll call you later. Oh, Peter, why must you continually treat me like a used dish rag? No wonder I'm driven to date that obnoxious Biff Rifkin. At least he treats me with consideration. We've heard it all before, Deb. All right, that's the end of that. I'll get into Spectacular Spider-Man number 66. Cover dated May of 1982. Oh, this is a crazy-looking cover. So, yeah, they played with some perspective here on this cover. So Electro is standing atop the epic illustrated sign, shocking Spider-Man. And it says Electro is back. Name of the story, I guess it's called Electro is back. They don't have a name on the inside here. Story by Bill Mantlo, art by Ed Hannigan and Jim Mooney, letters by Diana Albers, colors by Bob Sharon. Oh, Deb and Biff Rifkin are out and about and happen to see Marcy and Pete walking together. Biff wants to go say hello, and Deb's like, no, thank you. Biff may come on like an obnoxious preppy to most people, but he treats me really fine. How Pete gets pulled into some kind of fight against Electro, and this is all happening in front of Deb and Biff. All right, what's next for Deb Whitman? 67 and 68. All right, next issue. June of 1982. On the front here, we have what looks... I've seen a cover similar to this before, I swear. It's Peter Parker's head, and then what looks to be like spider legs coming out, and each part inside the spider webs is kind of like a different panel of the comic. Got Boomerang fighting Spider-Man up here. Aunt May's over there. She's got her frail old face like she heard some horrible news. Deb Whitman, who is crying in our bottom right panel here. Oh, something's going to happen. Name of the story is Boomerang, the killer who keeps coming back. Written by Bill Mantlo. Pencils by Edward Hannigan. Inks by Alan Milgram. Lettering by Jim Novak. And colored by Bob Sharon. Deborah's got to call Pete. Try and get him up, get him to school. Apparently he's late. Pete is seeing things maybe, and he punches a locker thing, and he's trying to punch like some kind of vision he's seeing of Spider-Man. And Deb hears it. Pete tries to cover up the dented locker, and she's worried that he might have hurt his hand. And he says he doesn't need somebody hovering over him like a den mother. And Deborah grabs her face. I'm so sorry. Only wanted to help. And takes off running. All right, 68. July of 1982. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, Vengeance cries the Robot Master. And we got a cover here of what big close-up of a guy's face, and then the reflection of a lens over his eye. You see Spider-Man dealing with some kind of a couple different robots. One's got him wrapped up in some tentacles, and the other one's trying to shoot some flames at him or something. Title of the story is Hell Hath No Fury Like a Robot Scorned. Bill Mantlo scripting, Luke McDonnell layout, and Jim Mooney finishing. Diana Albers lettering, Bob Sharon colorist. Looks like Pete's heading back to the office. Pete comes in and he's worried because Deb tells him that he shouldn't be there now. And he's like, why not? She says it's Biff. So Biff is mad because Pete told her in the previous issue that he didn't want a den mother. It basically upset her. And now Biff's like really mad. Where do you get off making my lady cry, Parker? Oh my gosh, Pete's like, Rifkin, I haven't the foggiest idea what fantasies Deb's been telling you, but they don't concern me. And Deb's like, what? I saw you smash the locker. Now, she doesn't say that. She's thinking that with his bare hand. Well, Biv's ready to punch him, and Pete just backhands him. Meanwhile, Dr. Sloan watches the whole thing and wants him to come into his office. Well, Pete's walking out, and Deb tells Biff to stay on the ground. She'll go talk to Peter, so she follows him, and she has this suspicion about Peter. As she goes through the door to the roof, she watches Spider-Man swing away, and she's putting it together. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It took us a long time to get here, folks. Marvel 2-in-1 Volume 90. Come up near the end of this run of this comic. August of 82. Marvel 2-in-1 The Thing and Spider-Man. Monsters, Magicians, and Mayhem. And we have Spider-Man and The Thing fighting off some gigantic monster that's coming out of the ground on the cover of this. The name of the story is Eyes of the Sorcerer. Jan... Oh, I spelled that wrong last time. It's Jan Sternad, S-T-R-N-A-D, scripting. Alan Kupperberg, penciling. Jim Mooney, inking. Diana Albers, lettering. And George Roussos on colors. And it looks like Pete and Deb are out and about again. Now, Pete, among the enraptured throng of spectators, is Peter Parker, secretly the Amazing Spider-Man, and his occasional date, Debra Whitman. Now, it's just a friendly thing then. Deb's been pretty involved with Biff. In that last issue, I mean, Biff was ready to swing at Peter Parker because of what he did to her. They're in Central Park, and there's the anachronistic noise of jousters on horseback, maypole dancers, and the fanfare of trumpets. Anyway, they're on a date. Yeah, it's a Renaissance fair. And Deb wants to catch the Alicia Masters exhibit while they're there. Pete's kind of sitting there thinking, like, man, I really wish I could feel something in return, because he knows Deb likes him. Deb sees a magician, and they go over to check out this magician. The magician ends up handcuffing himself, and he can't get out. And Deb's like, feels sorry for the guy. Just then, Alicia Masters and The Thing come into the park, and Deb wants to meet Alicia Masters. Well, they get to talking, and Deb gets upset because Pete starts talking to Alicia, and she feels like he doesn't even know she's there. Oh, jeez. Deb's like, hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go run off and live in Camelot with King Arthur. And Pete's like, okay, that's fine. He ain't listening to her. He ain't paying no attention. And off she goes. She's mad. One brush off too many, she says. She's done. Looks like Deb's been hanging out with Alicia. And Deb wants to get involved and help some lady out, but Alicia says, no, we need to stay back. And that's the end of that. Amazing Spider-Man number 231. Cover dated August of 1982, When a Cobra Comes a-Callin'. And it has Cobra on the back of Spider-Man, looking like he's getting ready to bite him, as they are on the side of a building in a moonlit night. Title of the story is Caught in the Act. Written by Roger Stern, scripted by Roger Stern. John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney are on art. Joe Rosen on letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. There's Deb, manning the desk at Empire State University. Looks like she's getting a call from Betty Leeds, asking to talk to Peter Parker. Guess he doesn't work there anymore as a teacher's assistant, so something bad happened. Betty wants to talk to Peter, and Betty works at the Daily Bugle. And she's going to transfer her to Pete, who's in one of the labs. But Deb begins to think, if this is a call from the Bugle, if I know what I know about you, then this is probably trouble. Going into Spectacular Spider-Man number 69 here. It's the return of Cloak and Dagger on the front. Spider-Man crawling down the front of the cover. Cloak and Dagger are, I can't tell if they're being attacked. I think they're being attacked. They're trying to fend off a horde of people. So this came out August of 1982. The name of the story is In Darkness Seldom Seen. So Cloak and Dagger, huh? All right. Well, where's Deb? So it looks like it's about the end of the day at Empire State University, and Deb catches up with Peter. Peter, may I have a word with you? I guess she lets Peter know that Biff was really surprised at how he was tossed across the corridor last week. Pete just kind of is mad and like, you made up some kind of a story that got your boyfriend mad at me. I don't have time for your fantasies. And then walks off. And she's asking him not to go. She's not angry with him. Then she starts crying again. It's not Biff I care about, it's you. And I know your secret. She knows he's Spider-Man. All right, we're heading at an Amazing Spider-Man number 232. Oh boy. Now we got the villain Hyde on the front here. Mr. Hyde. Kind of a purple cover and showing the transformation into Mr. Hyde, featuring the most savage supervillain of all. Hyde in plain sight. Roger Stern scripting, John Romita Jr. on pencils, Jim Mooney inks, Diana Albers on letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. Looks like they're having a get-together, a going-away party for Peter at the Dr. Sloan's or at the lab or the TA lounge or something. Deb's there. And of course, she's thinking about Peter Parker being Spider-Man. All right, we're coming down to it. 3 issues left. We're getting into Spectacular Spider-Man number 70, 72, and 74. The front cover looks like this is from September of 1982. Spectacular Spider-Man number 70. And on the cover it says, "Is this the end of Cloak and Dagger?" And it's got this cyborg-looking dude holding both of them up. Title of our story is The Great Cloak and Dagger Hunt. Scripted by Bill Mantlo. Art Ed Hannigan and Al Milgram. Letters Joe Rosen. Colors by Glennis Ween. Back at ESU, Deb has to talk to Peter shortly after class. And again, she has to talk to Peter, and Peter's like, "Is this about me hitting your boyfriend?" I think we covered that last time, Pete. This time it's not about Rifkin at all. She says she's worried about Pete, and Pete hears a story come on the news about Cloak and Dagger, and he tells Deb, "I've got to go." And she goes, "Because of that report?" She tells him she doesn't want him to go because he may be in danger. And he's like, "No, I photograph superheroes. It's my specialty." And she's like thinking to herself, "You're lying, dude. I know your terrible secret. You can't fool me any longer. You are Spider-Man, and I am so afraid." At the end of this is interesting. I mean, we've been reading all this stuff about Debra up until now. Other than the fact that she was really insecure, I never got the impression that she was making things up. But listen to this dialogue here as we end this issue. Somewhere Debra Whitman tunes out the nightly news. She thinks to herself, talks to herself, "I know we've gone all over this before, my fantasies, the way I mix up what's real with what isn't. But this time I'm sure I'm not imagining anything. Oh, you'll laugh. You'll say, 'Debra, you're being silly,' but there's no other answer for it. Either the boy I think I'm in love with is Spider-Man, or I'm in more trouble than I thought." So, yeah, now it's kind of like trying to put this spin on it like she has a problem with, I guess, understanding what's real and what isn't. All right, we're going to issue 72. Oh, this cover's neat. 72, November of 1982. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. And it's Doc Ock, like, with his tentacles. And the tentacles are, like, pushing the sign out of the way. They did a lot of neat stuff with the title of the book. It almost looks like they're underwater. And, like, one of the tentacles is coming through and breaking glass, waiting for Dr. Octopus. And our story is Waiting for Dr. Octopus. Story by Bill Mantlo, art by Ed Hannigan and Al Milgram, lettered by Novak, coloring by Ween. Who was the artist here? It didn't sound like it was a departure, but let me just double check that, because this art looks different. Ed Hannigan and Al Milgram, I mean, I guess it just looks different. All right, looking for Deb Whitman. Scanning through this, and there's all sorts of Spider-Man's rogues in this. There she is. Now she's at a psychiatrist's office, and she's crying. She can't hold back the tears, and she's asking the psychiatrist if he wants her to go through the fantasies again. "You have my records now. You know all about my past. I'm a very unstable person. Doctor, either Peter Parker is Spider-Man, or I am hopelessly insane." She grabs the doctor for a hug. Now, the list on MarvelFandom.com has it going Spectacular Spider-Man 70, 72, and 74, but it just said that next issue would show more on what's going on with Deb. So let's just take a look at issue 73 real quick, and we'll see. So this drops December of 1982. Caught between an Ock and a hard place. Looks like he's got to worry about the owl here, who very much looks like he has Wolverine claws coming out of his wrist. Not only that, the owl has that hair too. The title on the cover is Spider in the Middle. And on the inside, we got Bill Mantlo scripting, Al Milgram penciling, Jim Mooney on inks, Diana Albers on letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. And somebody just bursts through the door and says, "Peter Parker, you are the spectacular Spider-Man," pointing right at him. Oh, wow. So Deb may not show up in this issue, but I think the doctor paid Pete a visit. So much for Dr. Kuchlin's, apparently is his name, doctor-patient confidentiality, because he just shows up and tells her that she's schizophrenic. She's schizophrenic, and her worry for Pete's safety has exacerbated her schizophrenia. All right, I'm just going to scan through here, see if Deb shows up at all. She does not. But at the end of this issue, Pete calls up Dr. Kuchlin and says he'd like to help. So I guess they're going to try to do something to cure Deb Whitman. All right, let's get to it. So our front cover. This is January of 1983. The cover shows Debra Whitman, with a shocked look on her face as like 8 Spider-Men spin webs all over her. And it's got a white background and it's kind of like a web behind it. So let's actually read this issue and see what happens. It's only been 40 years. Here we go. Name of the story is Fantasia. Bill Mantlo story, Bob Hall on art, Jim Mooney on inks, Diana Albers on letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. We open it up and Deb is watching Peter punch out. He's in his Spider-Man outfit with his mask off, and she's worried that he's going to get hurt. And he's like, nobody can hurt the spectacular Spider-Man. But then you realize that she's telling her doctor that's how the dream goes every night. The doctor's trying to explain to her that she's confusing fantasy with reality and that Peter is not Spider-Man. She believes with absolute certainty that he is. So as Deb leaves, the doc goes into another room and finds Peter, who's been sitting there in a bathroom listening to the whole thing. He asks the doctor what he can do to help her. And he says, the doc's like, we need to shock her out of her fantasy. So you need to put on this costume, and gives Peter this, rented Spider-Man costume. Pete throws it back at him and says, no, I'm not doing it. He says, I'll help her my way. As he leaves the office, he turns into Spider-Man swinging across the city. There is a female figure that notices his swinging. Pete's worried about the Owl and Doc Ock about to turn the city into a battleground, as he says. So as he flies over the Oppenheimer Atomic Research Lab, he finds some people breaking into the lab. It's the Owl Gang. It was coming into this facility only to discover the Octopus Gang attempting to steal a nuclear device. Spider-Man steps in, starts throwing these guys left and right, taking all of them out. Spider sense goes off, and it's the Owl. The Owl takes this device, gets through the roof, onto a helicopter. Cops show up, Pete's out. He is gone. So Pete's heading back to Empire State University and starts to talk to Dr. Sloan. Dr. Sloan is giving him a hard time about not preparing for an exam. But Pete's looking for Deb Whitman. Dr. Sloan talks about how she has suffered so much already. And Pete's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Dr. Sloan mentions that she was just out of a hospital when he hired her. And if Pete wants to know more about it, he needs to go talk to Biff Rifkin. Pete's off to go find Biff Rifkin. Meanwhile, Doc Ock is meeting up with the Kingpin. Doc's like, you will bow before Dr. Otto Octavius. Doc Ock reaches into a safe and steals a device of some sort and then crashes through the window and escapes. But it turns out that it's a fake. Kingpin had it stashed in a filing cabinet. And then the lights go out and it gets stolen right out from his hand. I think it's the Black Cat, ladies and gentlemen. Now Pete shows up at a gym and finds Biff Rifkin there. Pete apologizes for punching him, actually slapping him. Well, Pete mentions that he wants to help Deb, and Biff's like, well, at least you finally noticed her. She's been head over heels for you for a long time. But all you've done is hurt her, just like her rat of a husband. Oh, Biff tells a little bit of backstory here. Sorry, I'm reading this, and I am starting to get like this faint remembrance of these panels. And that's kind of not in a good way. I'll go ahead and I'll kind of explain. I'm trying to figure out if I should explain now or if I should explain later. But so Biff's talking about Deb's husband. Apparently, he was like some big shot on campus, but he treated her like dirt. And Biff says that it's so weird because this podcast is about to take a turn. I wasn't expecting this. Again, it's been 40 years since I read this, but I'm about to lay some heavy stuff out there. All right, man, and it's so weird that this would do this story, and this being the first comic would do this right now. And you're all probably sitting there going, like, get on with it, man. Tell us what's going on. All right, here we go. So Biff's talking about how, she fell for this guy who treated her like dirt, and she has a problem with doing that a lot. She falls for guys that don't treat her very well. She gets married to this guy, drops out of school. Biff ends up seeing her like later on down the line and is like, hey, Deb, how's things going? How's married life treating you? And when he taps her on the shoulder and she turns around, she has this like swollen black eye. Deb says nothing and takes off running. So yeah, that night I stopped by their apartment. While outside I could hear him hitting her. Get your lousy hands off the Lady Whitman. So he breaks into the house. What? How dare you burst into my house? And this panel, this is the panel. Kind of sticks with me here. So as Biff is kind of like breaking into the house, this guy and Deborah's husband has her by the hair and fist clenched, and she looks like she's, been beaten. And Biff runs up and smacks him right in the face, knocks him out, grabs Deb, takes her to the hospital. She's got looks like a broken hand or wrist. And Biff asks her, how badly does he have to hurt you before you wake up to the truth and leave him? And then he says, she wouldn't listen to me. Deb was a battered wife who let herself be battered because she refused to face reality. She still persists in seeing people as they aren't, Parker. Me as a not too bright Joe Jock, and you as attentive and considerate. But I love Deb. I'd marry her in a second if she'd only straighten out. And hey, where are you going? Pete takes off and he's going to try some shock therapy. So we're going to finish this comic here in a few, but I want to stop here because this is, wow. So I got all this stuff going through my head right now to try and it makes so much more sense. As I've been sitting here doing this podcast or recording, I've been like, man, is this actually going to be something? Is this actually going to be worth somebody listening to? Is it actually going to tie in with the theme of what's going on, foundations? My initial thought was to be like, hey, let's take the first comic that you can ever remember reading and read it. And then as I started looking at Deb Whitman, and she was a character I didn't know anything about. So it occurred to me like a large dune starts with one grain of sand. This one comic turns into thousands for me. Now, other people that are participating in this Superblog team up are probably going to have way better ideas of how to work foundations into their project, podcast, blog that they're doing. But for me, I was like, this is the one comic that I can remember. This is the earliest comic that I can remember having. And I still have it to this day. Now, did I buy it at 4 years old? I don't think so. My earliest memories are of this comic, and I really don't know if you know how your memories can be. You know how, as you get older, things definitely are not as you remember them, most likely. Your memory fades. You have false memories. So what I can remember with this comic is reading it on a vacation, or at least having it with me on a vacation, I think heading to Myrtle Beach. Thing that I can recall on that same vacation was watching the movie King Kong on the hotel television and being real sad when King Kong died. So I tie those two things together. So there's how I'm saying it's a foundation. It's this one grain of sand that turns into a brick that starts me on my collector's journey. But here's the thing that really just occurred to me rereading this issue. And this is legitimately the first time I've probably reread this issue in those years. As far as a foundation goes, personally, during these years between, I want to say my mom and my dad got divorced in 80 when I was 2, I think. Shortly after my mom got divorced from my dad. They had a house they were living in. That obviously changed. My mom met a man by the name of Bo, and she got married to him, and I don't know when. I cannot recall when. These are some very dark years of my life. I mean, shoot, I can't remember when Bo became a part of our lives, but this was it had to have been sometime shortly after my mom and dad got divorced, like 81, 82, because I can remember Bo living at the house that mom and dad owned. Now, I don't recall, I was too young to remember my mom and dad together at all, but I can remember when my stepdad Bo came in, was living with us for sure at that house. And we lived in a few different places. And mom and Bo got separated. So we'll say between 1982 to 1985, so that's three or 4 years. Mom was married to Bo, and Bo was a drunk. Bo was a mean drunk. And there were a lot of times as a kid, I can remember we had a large, I want to say it was a farmhouse. We were renting it, and it was actually being rented by another person on the other side of the house. And this is towards the latter part of mom and Bo's relationship. But Bo would beat my mom. Things got really physical. And that is something that clearly had an effect on me as a kid, as an adult to this day. There were times that my mom would have, black eyes, and there's a few things that I can remember pretty clearly. In that same farmhouse, I remember, I don't know if this was the final straw. There were a couple things that were, when Bo would get abusive, it was always after drinking. That's normally when it was. He could be somewhat tolerable when he wasn't drinking, but as soon as he started drinking and he started getting mean, that's when things would usually go downhill. And I can remember to this day, he started doing something to mom. There was some kind of altercation. And I just remember getting in between them both, 5 years old, 6 years old, and I punched Bo square in the nuts, at least as best as I could. I didn't know what I was hitting. I just knew that I had to stop him from doing what he was doing to my mom. And again, I wonder about this stuff. I was so young at the time. Has my mind glorified these things, or was it worse? I don't know. But when I punched him, I recall him picking me up, and I believe he was going to throw me. And my mom grabbed a hold of me and said, "Don't you touch my son." My mom had these chairs, and the story she tells me, she bought these chairs, I think with my dad, like these dining room chairs. I swear to goodness, if you looked at them, they're brown, like plastic leather chairs, but they're really, my gosh, they have been around for 40 years. They have these wheels on them. They wheel around. I remember maybe Bo shoved mom while she was holding me and us both going into one of those chairs. But I vividly remember that. And then there was another time where we decided we were leaving, or at least mom was deciding to leave. Maybe this was the night that we did leave. I don't know. I just remember mom finally had enough, and we got in the car, and it was 10, 11 o'clock, something stupid. And he was mad that we were leaving. I feel like something happened to where the back windshield got broken or something like that. But we ended up leaving, and I know that we left and went and lived at my grandpa's, which seriously was probably about a 10 to 15 minute walk from where we were living before. But regardless, Bo didn't come up there and mess around. I can remember one night where we were at grandpa's. It was just me and mom, and Bo came up and was pounding on the door wanting to get in, and we just cowered in fear. He didn't come in, but I can remember seeing his shadow and him pounding on the door through the window. And it's strange to think that I set out on this journey and that I was going to read this comic, and I just wanted to learn a little bit about Deb Whitman. Who was she and what happened? And then discover this parallel, the first comic that I can remember reading. And I have a feeling, as I was reading this panel, I got this sense like I can remember reading this and tying this comic together with what was going on with my mom at the time. Deb Whitman is beaten, but she keeps going back to this guy. My mom had done the same thing. She obviously finally made a decision to break the cycle, and we never had to worry about abuse again. She married a guy in 86 who treated her right, but there was a cycle of violence that she had to get out of in order to protect herself and me. But she had been married a total of 4 times by the time she married him. Anyway, Bo, I think she married twice. You can see that mom didn't know how to get away from that. She didn't know how to break that cycle, and it took some pretty extreme circumstances to make her finally go, enough is enough. There's another moment that sticks out in my head. I don't think Bo was intending to be mean, but it's weird because she was my mom. I felt protective of her in some way, I guess, even at that young of an age. But I knew the type of person Bo was, and I was scared of him. And I remember one time we were walking down by the river, and he picked my mom up and acted like he was going to throw her in the river. And I think what bothered me was I think he was trying to be funny, really. But he had this way of also letting you know that he was in control by doing things like that. And my mom was laughing, but you could also tell there was fear that he may actually do it. It was probably 70%, oh, ha, ha, stop it, and 30%, I wouldn't put it past this guy to try and kill me right now. What a tragic foundation that is for me. And mine's not that bad of a story compared to other people out there that are victims of abuse. My mom got away within 4 or 5 years. Some people have had to endure it their whole life. And God bless Deb Whitman, who this character, at a point in her life now, is realizing that she may need some help. That's why she's talking to the doctor about it. Foundations. Everybody has those things that make up the core of who you are. The Spectacular Spider-Man number 74, is it the core of what I am? It's a part of it. Are the events that I just gave you that happened between the years of 82 to 85 a part of the core of who I am? Absolutely. We're 40 years out from all that. And to this day, I worry about the stress and the fear of being that type of father. I can absolutely 100% tell you that I am not an abusive father. But I know that fear, the trauma of what happened to me in those years affected me in a very deep and profound way. So seeing this panel of Mr. Whitman, I guess is his name, I didn't catch his first name, having this woman by the hair of her head, her on her knees, and him standing over her with a clenched fist, that hit me. All right, let's continue with this story. I'm not even halfway through it yet. So Biff knocks out Mr. Whitman, takes her to the hospital. She's not going to decide to Deb's not going to leave the guy. Finally, I think she must make the decision to get out. Well, Pete says he's off to do some shock therapy. And Pete's decided that he's going to show her that he is Spider-Man. He'll do that even if it costs him his secret identity. Meanwhile, we got the Owl and Doc Ock facing off in a warehouse. Turns out there are two devices that they each need to be combined in order to work. I guess Ock's got the triggering mechanism. Oh boy, here's an ad for Parker Brothers Atari Spider-Man. Oh man. Oh, the trigger mechanism falls to the ground and breaks. Doc Ock just realizes he has been duped, throws the Owl into some crates and leaves. Parker is swinging into Deb's apartment, and outside he sees her talking to her stuffed animals. Well, Spider-Man opens up the sliding glass doors to her apartment as Deb lay there on the bed, and he says, "Yes, I am Spider-Man. I am Peter Parker." Deb gets over and runs towards him, and she says, "This isn't another one of my fantasies." He says, "I'm real. Take off the mask. See the truth." She pulls the mask off. He looks her right in the face. He says, "I am Spider-Man. I don't know how you learned my secret, but I couldn't let you believe that it was all another delusion." Deb is shocked beyond belief, turns and clutches her mouth, and then Deb starts to laugh. She tells him, "Thanks for putting on the silly mask and dressing up. You've shocked me back to my senses, made me realize what a fool I've been to let my fantasies run away with me again. Peter Parker, you are the best friend I've ever had." She reaches over and hugs Pete. And Parker's like, "Shock therapy worked." All right, looks like the next day, Pete is seeing Deb off as she is heading back to go and divorce her husband. They give a kiss to each other, and Pete wishes her luck. She says she'll stay in touch, and she's off. One panel, Pete starts to think, what if Deb ever wonders how Peter Parker climbed up into her terrace? All right, well, leaves that door open a little bit. Pete's off swinging around, and he says Deb Whitman's out of his life. He can get home, start studying for finals, but then he runs into the Black Cat. All right, there it is. Spectacular Spider-Man issue 74. Okay, quick outro here. So when you look at yourself and what shaped you as a person, you can imagine all the things that came together to build you into the person that you are. Events and interactions at the start of your life can mold you into the person you've become. As you heard, this event has sort of revealed to me possibly why Spectacular Spider-Man number 74 has been the one comic that I can remember from those days of my youth. The parallels with my own life were not something I was consciously making back then, as far as I know, but now it's pretty plain to see. Spectacular Spider-Man 74 is the seed that started a garden that turned into a field. Would I have been doing what I am today if I would have never ended up with that issue? In about a month, I'll be celebrating my 10-year anniversary of the Source Material Comics podcast. This issue was the first brick in building what I would become. The other thing I want to point out was the unexpected traumatic resonance I experienced while recording this episode. Reading those panels of that issue where Deb was being beaten by her husband stirred a realization in me of how trauma can unfortunately be a part of the foundation of who we are. Looking back at Deb's comic book experience up to where we stopped, you can easily see how the abuse at the hands of her husband damaged her mental health. You heard it. I pointed out a couple times how insecure Deb was. It practically bled through the page to the point where it annoyed me a little as I was reading. But now it makes a lot more sense. Those bricks that made her mental foundation stable, they were damaged with what her husband had done to her. And when that happens, the whole structure can tumble. Although one would argue the ending felt a bit rushed and the science behind shock therapy may be a bit suspect, I will give credit where credit is due. Mantlo shines a light on abuse and mental health in the early 80s in a Spider-Man comic. Remember that healing takes time. Foundation repair can be intensive and time-consuming. Unfortunately, some cracks may remain, and you have to repeatedly patch them up. But here's the light at the end of the tunnel for Deb and myself. Although we were both victims of abuse, we were able to escape. And the good thing about foundations is that even though they may falter, they can be repaired and strengthened. Deb knew enough to get help. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic abuse, reach out to the National Domestic Abuse Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. I want to thank you guys for listening. If you made it all the way through, you got to hear a very personal side of me, and it means a lot that you listen to my words. Now, this is an event, a Superblog team-up event, Foundations, and I want to give you guys an idea of the other participants that are out there providing content along with the Superblog team-up. Other participants include Between the Pages blog, with everything I need to know I learned from Star Trek. Teal Productions Newsprint Commando, Wit's End, a foundational comic. The Superhero Satellite comes at us with the Comics Digest, a foundational entryway to comics from Archie to DC, Blue Ribbon, and beyond. And Dave's Comic Heroes blog, Justice League of America 200. My good friend Evan Bevins with Asterisk 51 blog, My First Next Issue, Incredible Hulk number 333. And finally on the list is the DC Multiverse. What is a penny worth? Enough to fund the Wayne Foundation. Links for all of these will be in the episode description, or just hop on to Twitter and type in hashtag SBTU in order to enjoy all of the content that these creators are providing for this event. All right, we're out of here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much again for joining me. We'll talk to you soon. I'm Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
August 21st, the journey starts. A spark of passion lit our hearts. From first appearances to plot lines bold, foundations laid in tales of old. Heroes rise, they fall, they fight through pages turning day and night. The start, the spark, the trigger fire that built the worlds we all admired. Foundations ignite the stories that shape the light. From Wade's mission to Starfleet's flight, we're diving deep into comic heights. Foundations ignite legends that forge the night. In quick turns and comic firsts. We celebrate what quenched the thirst for heroes, villains, tales untold. In Foundations, our love unfolds. Foundations ignite the stories that shake the light. From Wayne's mission to Starfleet's flight, we're diving deep into comic heights.